In 1942, a small shipment of America's newest infantry anti-tank weapon reached British commanders in Egypt. The M1 Bazooka was still experimental, still unfamiliar, and still surrounded by quiet optimism. The British did what professional armies do. They tested it. A captured German Panzer III was brought forward. The range was set, the bazooka was loaded, the rocket fired. It struck the tank. It penetrated the armor. The weapon did exactly what it was designed to do, and after watching the demonstration, the British response was simple. No, thank you. This was not arrogance. This was not stubborn bureaucracy. This was not a rejection of American engineering. The British had already committed to something else, something heavier, something uglier, something that looked unfinished, felt brutal, and worked on principles the Americans had deliberately avoided. The PIAT weighed nearly twice as much as the bazooka. It demanded enormous physical strength just to operate. Soldiers cursed it, they struggled with it, and physically could not cock it at all, but it could do something the bazooka never could. It could be fired from inside a building without killing everyone behind the operator. In the hedgerows of Normandy, the shattered towns of Italy, and the desperate close-range street fighting at Arnhem, that single advantage changed outcomes. British Army analysis of the initial Overlord period showed that PIAT teams destroyed roughly 7% of all. German tanks knocked out by British forces, that number exceeded the kill rate of RAF, rocket-firing Typhoon aircraft, a weapon that looked like a plumber's nightmare outperformed fighter bombers. To understand why, you have to understand the problem both weapons were trying to solve. By 1941, German armor had outrun infantry anti-tank weapons. British soldiers facing Panzer IIs and IAVs had few realistic options. The boy's anti-tank rifle, firing a .55 caliber round, could penetrate about 21 millimeters of armor at 300 yards. German tanks now carried 30 to 50 millimeters of frontal armor, often sloped to increase effective thickness. The boy's rifle was obsolete before the war had properly begun. Anti-tank guns worked when they were present, but they weighed thousands of pounds. They required vehicles to move. And once emplaced, they were almost impossible to reposition under fire. Infantry needed something else, something a single soldier could carry, something that could be brought forward on foot, something that could kill a tank at ranges where the tank could kill you first. The solution did not come from larger bullets, it came from physics. The shaped charge offered a theoretical breakthrough. Physicists called it the Monroe effect. Engineers understood it more simply. A hollow cone, usually copper, backed by explosive, when detonated, collapsed inward. The metal formed a narrow, extremely fast jet. This jet did not rely on speed in the traditional sense. It relied on shape, and that jet could punch through. Armor far thicker than any solid projectile of comparable size. For the first time, infantry could theoretically kill tanks without heavy guns. But theory was not the problem. Delivery was. The shaped charge only worked if you could get it onto the target. Different nations made different choices. The Americans chose rockets. The Germans chose rockets. The British chose a spring. Lieutenant Colonel Latham Valentine Stewart. Blacker was not a conventional weapons designer. He was an Indian Army veteran, an early aviation enthusiast, a man who spent years experimenting with ideas most professionals dismissed as impractical. In 1930, he patented a concept known as the spigot mortar. The principle was counterintuitive. Instead of firing a projectile from inside a barrel, the spigot mortar used a solid steel rod. The bomb sat over the rod, its hollow tail containing a small propellant charge. When fired, the rod struck the propellant. The explosion launched the bomb forward, while simultaneously driving the rod backward. There was no barrel to contain expanding gases. There was no tube. There was no backblast. All of the energy went into the projectile. For years, British Army showed little interest. Then Dunkirk happened. Desperation changes what gets listened to, Churchill personally witnessed a demonstration of Blacker's first practical weapon, the Black Bombard. It was a fixed-mount launcher weighing over 100 pounds. It's firing a 20-pound anti-tank bomb. Crude, immobile, but effective. More. Then 22,000 were produced for the Home Guard. But Blacker wanted something else, something portable, something a single infantryman could use. In June 1941, he demonstrated a shoulder-fired version to the War Office. Everything went wrong. The casing was flimsy. The spigot misfired. Its bombs failed to detonate on impact. The verdict was brutal. The Ordnance Board declared that the weapon would prove ineffective as an anti-tank weapon under any conceivable conditions of employment. Blacker was removed from the project and reassigned. The idea should have died there. It didn't. At MD1, Churchill's secret weapons laboratory, known informally as the Toy Shop, Major Millis Jeffress saw something others had missed. He took Blacker's spigot concept and combined it with newly developed hollow charge warhead technology from the No. 74 Sand Grenade, better known as the Sticky Bomb. This changed everything by early 1942. The redesigned shoulder weapon was impressing the same officials who had dismissed Blacker's original prototype. Production began in August 19, for a full month. Before American bazookas arrived in British hands for evaluation, the decision had already been made. The finished weapon was called the Projector, infantry, anti-tank. The PIAT weighed 32 pounds, measured 39 inches in length, and fired a 3.5-inch diameter bomb. Muzzle velocity was relatively low, around 250 feet per second, giving an effective range of roughly 100 to 115 yards against moving targets. Most soldiers considered 50 yards realistic. Armor penetration reached 75 to 100 millimeters, enough for the sides and rear of any German tank then in service. The real problem was reloading. The cocking mechanism became legendary. To cock the PI, the operator had to stand the weapon upright, place it on its butt, step on the shoulder pad, and lock the spring with a quarter turn, and haul upward using full body weight. The force required was around 200 pounds. Shorter soldiers sometimes physically could not do it. One training manual noted that recocking while prone was possible, but only with practice and considerable strength. This was not a forgiving weapon, but it offered something no rocket launcher could, no backblast. Ager? Yeah, exact. Wahi feel high jo op. Chait they, same flow, same energy, same seriousness. To surflick Dean, main binakisi delay, K next part ISI style main continue Kardunga. To understand why the PIA survived its brutality, you have to see what it was competing against. The American M1 Bazooka followed a completely different philosophy. Where the PIAT relied on stored mechanical energy, the Bazooka relied on propulsion. It weighed just 18 pounds, almost half the weight of the British weapon. It used a battery-powered electrical ignition system to fire a 2.36-inch rocket. When the trigger was pulled, the rocket motor ignited. Solid propellant burned inside the tube, accelerating the projectile to roughly 265 feet per second. On paper, it was superior. The effective range reached 150 yards, marginally better than the PIAT. Armor penetration was roughly 76 millimeters, comparable to the British weapon. Operation was simpler. Trained two-man team could fire and reload rapidly. The bazooka felt modern, but every advantage came with a cost. When the rocket motor ignited, propellant gases blasted violently out of the rear of the tube. This created a danger zone of roughly 15 meters behind the operator. Anyone standing there risked severe burns or worse. The firing signature was unmistakable. A loud, high-pitched whoosh, a bright flash, a thick smoke trail pointing directly back to the shooter. On dry ground, the backblast kicked up clouds of dust, visible from hundreds of yards away. In confined spaces, firing was suicidal. Basements, upper floors, trenches, all off-limits. The PIA had none of these limitations. British infantry school training manuals explicitly noted that the PIA could be fired from inside buildings if required. This was not a theoretical advantage. It was operational doctrine. More than 200 PIATs were airdropped to the French resistance for exactly this reason. Resistance fighters could fire from inside a room, attack a German vehicle at close range, and disappear before the enemy could identify the firing position. At Arnhem, British airborne records noted that PIA teams proved extremely difficult to locate in built-up areas. The firing report was a dull, heavy thud, not the bazooka's screaming exhaust blast. The weapon announced itself less and survived longer. The PIAT's first combat use came in early 1943. During the Tunisia campaign, initial reports were mixed. The weapon worked, but it was unforgiving. Canadian forces used PIATs extensively during the Sicily landings in July 1943. Early complaints focused on misfires and unreliable fuses, which sometimes failed to detonate unless the bomb struck armor squarely. This was close-range fighting. There was no margin for error. But as production improved and crews gained experience, the PIAT's reputation changed. By 1944, it had proven itself repeatedly. A Canadian Army survey conducted among 161 officers recently returned from combat produced a striking result. They were asked to rank infantry weapons by effectiveness. The PIAT ranked first above the Brin gun, above the Sten, above everything else. That ranking was not theoretical. It was earned in places where mistakes meant death. 6. Victoria Crosses were awarded for actions involving PIs. More than any other infantry, anti-tan,